Well, I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. Corey Gavitt has worked in education for 21 years. He began teaching in Colorado's Spring School District 11, where he taught science and engineering for 14 years. Before teaching, Corey roamed the wilds of California, Arizona, and Nevada as a geologist for several engineering firms. Corey's own academic studies came from the University of Wisconsin, go Badgers, where he earned bachelor's degrees of science in geology and geophysics. Corey was drawn to UCCS for his master's degree in curriculum and instruction in 2002 and returned in 2015 when he became a senior instructor training the next generation of STEM teachers with UCCSTeach. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you all for taking time in the spring. I want to quickly go over what's going to be on the docket today. So, as you said, I roamed the wilds, but I also did a lot of litigation, so I spent a lot of time as a scientific expert in the courtroom. Today I'll do a little bit of my background because I feel like when we talk about ethics, it's good to know where someone comes from in their background and the different perspective they bring to issues. Then I'll talk about the developing the Daniels Fund gave me the opportunity through the funding and released me ahead of time to develop quite a few things. I originally had started with one or two things and then just kept adding things to it. So we'll talk about some opportunities they gave us, and then I'll have some of the things that we can play with a little bit in the sandbox, some of the things I've created. We'll have you guys kind of pair up and have a crucial conversation on those. But I'll talk about my key takeaways after being a fellow for this entire year, getting to go to lots of presentations, getting to go to a conference, and also developing this and working with some other faculty here on campus, which is really really exciting and work that's going to continue. And then my call to action to anybody out there and here to continue this going and why it's so important. So for me, I realized that when I talk about ethics, I have a broad background. This doesn't even have them all in. When I look at this, I just kind of cringe a little bit. I can't stick to anything. But as a young boy, I started out working on my uncle's farm. And so I got that world. Then I took over, I was the groundskeeper for a country club. Then I worked in a body shop, painting cars during high school, painting cars. After high school, I graduated and moved into a factory. I worked for Fastenal, but I delivered parts and fasteners to people on factory lines. Then I decided I didn't want to work in a factory for the rest of my life, and I moved out to Colorado and got a job in Vail, and I was a lift op. Then I went into loss prevention in a pharmacy. Then I went and managed a men's clothing store. Then I decided after they got bought out, talking about ethics, and anybody in the company at Revco, which was the pharmacy I worked for, that got bought out, and after I bought them out, we couldn't get demoted, they didn't have a college degree. So I was going from being 19-ish years old, making $29,000 a year quite a long time ago, which was good money, to dropping down to 19, just because I didn't want to be bigger. So I kind of went to college out of spite, just because of that. Started school, through school, I worked in a call center. I got held up at a gas station I worked at. I worked at a liquor store in the hood in Athens, Georgia, which was fascinating. I worked in a laundry room, a hotel room, just trying to get through and pay for everything. Then I moved to the University of Wisconsin, transferred up there from down in Georgia. My summers I spent up in Alaska working on whale and sightseeing yachts. I worked in an analytical geochemistry lab. Worked as a bartender to get through college. And then I graduated, and like Melissa said, I went on to become a geological engineer. Moment of insanity, I call it. I destroyed my rotator cuff, screwing around in college, and it never really fixed. And like I talked about, I did a lot of litigation, and because of my shoulder started giving me problems, they were going to relegate me to a courtroom expert, which was great and fine, but it wasn't why I got into geology. I love to be outdoors. I love doing mapping. I loved all that stuff. So I decided to go and become a teacher. I'm not sure how that connected in my brain, but it worked out okay. I coached hockey, track, basketball, football, all those things. So I had those ethical dilemmas, robotic teams. So seeing people in different lights, then made my way back here. All of that to be said is when I talk about ethics, I feel like I bring a lot of different perspectives. I taught with teachers who went to school, went to college to become a teacher, and then became a teacher in the entire world outside of, obviously their real life, revolved around that ethical dilemma. And sometimes I don't think we see everything from the different perspectives of either our students, our faculty, our people in the business, our customers, and anybody that we're looking at that. So I'll add a little bit of that. The first super awesome thing that I got to do was the Ethics First Crucial Conversations. We have 3 books. It was awesome. The conference
Only if you want
and everyone at my table won. I was able to take, so one of the courses I teach is apprentice teaching. So it's taking my math, science, and engineering students who are in their final semester. So they're out in schools teaching. And I was able to take them to this conference with me, along with a coworker who also decided to tag along. I introduced him and said, "Can I go?" And I said, "Yeah." So we had a really good time. One of the big takeaways was at the Crucial Conversations, it lies in a free flow of relevant information. And that was a big topic that was going on. Because I require my students to always reflect, when we're talking about this, reflections are huge for me. So after the conference, I had them write some reflections, and I just want to share some of their words. So my biggest takeaway from the conference was to avoid creating your own story. In other words, stop yourself when you are painting a picture of someone else's intent based on your own personal feelings and observations. Instead, it is paramount to only consider the facts in each scenario, since often the other party's perspective in reality is entirely different from the perspective in the story you created for them. My other takeaway was the importance of establishing common ground to recognize goals of each party in the scenario. And we'll get to this poster in a second up here, but that just tied in so nicely with that free flow. When I looked at one of my students, and this was like, I didn't tell them anything about the other stuff. We hadn't done anything with the Daniel's principles yet or anything like that. The second thing of the book summary, I actually stayed in contact with the company. And in the book summary, it said, create conditions within yourself and others that will make dialogue the path of least resistance. And when we talk about crucial conversations, when we talk about being ethical, in an educational setting, teachers care. They care about their students. And sometimes that causes stress. Because who are you being ethical to? What are the ethics? Are the situational? Is your job to your principal? Is it to your district? Is it to your community? Is it to the kids sitting in front of you? And it becomes more challenging than it should be. And this was another one, I like to let my students do all my work for me. So you'll see a lot of quotes from them in here. A huge problem that we deal with as a society is the fact that we do not deal with things as they are dealt with to us. Instead, we avoid them in order to avoid an uncomfortable situation. In a profession in which communication is a key component, I believe that it is important to know how to approach the situations in a way that is both respectful and honest for all parties. Again, when we look at our labels over here, we're going to see respect, we're going to see honesty, we're going to see those kind of things coming through. So just it was a great conference. Just in a one-day session while having these conversations, I let them go back to their school, and I wanted them to teach for a week thinking about this stuff, and they did the reflection a week later. So this is what they retained out of going to that conference. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is the idea of mastering your story comes from separating facts from fiction, taking responsibility for emotions that arise, finding common ground entails creating a safe place. These conversations are all around us, and it takes making a conscious effort to handle them in an appropriate way. As I move into the profession of teaching, I will be dealing with these types of situations with students, staff, community members. It is crucial to know how to approach these types of situations before it is too late. And that was my push when I sold for my fellowship career when I got accepted, was I wanted to create ethical dilemmas and scenarios and situations to put my students in before they were in them. Reacting in the moment is, as we all know, probably the wrong thing. You're going to have emotion. You're going to have, different things are going to creep up in there. And I wanted to put them into situations where they had to have critical conversations with each other and then with experts. So we'll look at some of the scenarios that I created. Most of them are actual real things that happened to either myself or to other people. during my teaching career. But that was my big push. So before I had even started writing these scenarios and we had gone to the conference, my students were already addressing it, that this was really, really critical for them and they needed this. So then I was able to go on and kind of push myself through. One of the first things that I did, because I just wanted to introduce it, and we're not going to do this one here, but I hand out this document to them. And then this is the NEA, the National Educators Association. I also have two other code of conducts for teaching, because there's multiple entities that all come in and tell teachers what they should do. So we took a look at those code of conducts, the ethics review from the professionals of what teachers were signing on to do. And I'm not going to click out of this because I'm not sure how that's going to work. I need to at one point, so if we have to mess it up, I will do that. But if you take the barcode from the beginning or the end, you can click on this and it'll take you to that code of ethics. And then you have this. If any of you have looked at a code of ethics, it's legalese, right? Like it's section 5.64A by B, blah, blah, blah. So I had them take those. And then I had them, remember an exercise several years ago that I did in a Daniel's meeting, where we took these and we kind of picked what we thought was most important. So I had to match these up with the code of ethics and to focus in on what they think are the biggest takeaways, so that you can put this in your room. You can work with this with kids. I don't know if you're going on to probably 4th and 5th grade. They have the capability of understanding that language. And if you can work on that and still get all of this mumbo jumbo, right? Then you don't have to dive into these details. We can just use this as our guide to get us through. So we did that exercise, and most of them we wound up with. It was kind of interesting because it's similar things that we come up with: integrity, trust. I'm trying to remember what the other was. I think it might have been respect. That they kind of narrowed it down to. If they focused on those three, they felt like they could fit the other ones. If you're respecting people, if you're accountable, then transparency should take care of itself and those kind of things. So that was their introduction to the principles, and then we tied it in here, and we'll do something else with that again as we move through. Then it went on to my work. So my work was, I said I was going to create these scenarios in a module, and of course that I would take one of my class periods and we would work on this. A couple things that I use, Project Zero. Again, if you have the barcode for this, you can just click on it, it'll take you to Project Zero. It's Harvard's dabbling in, there's some really good stuff in there. Some of it has to do with ethics, some of it has to do with some other things, but it's a really neat project. Lots of great tools and things to help you establish some of this stuff with the kids. I used the Connecticut State Department of Education only because they had a good format. They actually had scenarios developed for their teachers in a little mini course that they were teaching. I took some of them, tweaked them a little bit, and then a bunch of them I didn't like, so I just created my own. But that's where you can find that information up in there too. How many of you noticed that there's kind of a tree thing, solo tree thing going on? Does anybody know what this tree is? Other than I have it written right there. It made big moves. So this is a sycamore gap tree in Higgins Wall in North Cumberland, UK. And if you look around in this area, there aren't trees. So having this massive tree in this gap, but it was actually, again, if you click on that, it'll take you to a little story about this. I have it on here because I had, when you create a dilemma, someone cut this tree down. Yes, major ethical dilemma, huge problem. All the way around, the people that did it, why they did it. Now, if any of you saw that old movie, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, from years ago, there's lots of scenes that were filmed right here. It was all filmed in this area. There's a scene filmed right under this tree, so it's kind of like a little nostalgic there. There's poems written about it. There's art. This tree it was pretty famous. But then they had an ethical dilemma afterwards, not only just like dealing with the people that did it, but then what do we do with the tree? Do we replant? Do we do this? Do we make a bench out of it? Do we? So all of these things kind of came out, and if you click on that, it'll take you to a little article on all the things that have been done and that fascinating stuff. If you click on the UCCSTeach icon, it will take you to the scenarios that I'll hand out to you guys in a second. So you'll have all of my scenarios that I created and used with my class. So now we're gonna have some free samples. Cross-professional. This is Diane Stubbe, who is also an ethics fellow. If you click on this, it will take you to her scenarios. So my hope was, and online viewer, I was hoping to do a combination thing with future teachers, future school counselors, and future school social workers. The social work piece kind of fell through, but that allows us to have some room to work and build later on. But counseling, we worked together. So we brought her counseling students, my teaching students, and we brought them all together. She had already created, I believe that she created a case study of people who maybe didn't do the right thing with the ethics, and the students would look at the case studies, and then we went through my scenarios as a group. It was like, it's everything you hope for. We brought them together. I don't know how this is gonna go. I don't know how the kids are gonna receive this, and they would not stop talking. Getting through, we were supposed to get through my 6 scenarios in like 45 minutes. It went an hour, then we got to hers. The conversation, it was so neat to have that conversation. One of my big pushes was when I went into teaching, and granted, I left engineering, so I didn't go through a typical teaching program. I didn't know. Now I teach a typical teaching program, and I do know we don't have a lot of cross curriculum. So when I got into the school, I wasn't really sure what a counselor did and what a social worker did. Full disclosure, my wife was a social work major. But I didn't really know the difference in what was supposed to happen there and who I sent people to and what was my responsibility as a teacher, because these kids trust me and they opened up to me, not to the counselor. So like, where are those boundaries and what should happen? So that was a fascinating conversation. I absolutely loved it. Both groups want to do it again. We're hoping to maybe add some social work students into it. The program is building, and they maybe don't have people who are quite as interested in school every semester. But if we could get some, that would be great. But Cognitum, it is a really, really good site. I got it years ago, so it's gone up quite a bit in price. But it has modules, as you look up here. I'm not going to go through them all, but we'll kind of look at the at-risk middle high school. There's at-risk in education. It goes on to nursing, and I think there's even a business module or two. Basically, it's a simulator, and this is one of the things that Gary Klein had done some research working with EMTs, firefighters, and police. And what he found is that you can 10x people's decision-making if you put them in situations or simulators before they're put in those situations. Sure. And that doesn't mean talking about it. That means literally putting them in a scenario, and they have to come up with the response and the answer. The other thing that they found was that if you, it has to be the work of the student, right? The thinking has to come from the student. So if I have an expert in business ethics sitting at the table and we share a scenario and then he tells them what they should do, it doesn't work. They have to think. They have to think about what they would do. Then he could probe them with questions and say, have you thought about this? How do you think this scenario would play out? And allow them to work their way through their thinking. Because when it's happening like this, when you're in a classroom after school by yourself, and a student walks in and does something inappropriate, you don't have that other person. It's almost like, I always joke because I taught math and science, like, right, how many of you sat in your math classes and watched the professor solve problems and you're like, I got this, this is easy. Yeah. And then you look at the problem when you get home, and you're like, I don't even know how to start. That's right? A good analogy. Yeah, and it's crazy because it's easy, which makes it even more frustrating for the student. And imagine being in an ethical dilemma where you know this. If I just had that expert, like I would know the law, I would know whatever it is, I would know how to respond to this. This isn't a difficult decision, and I know the right one, but I don't want to make the kid feel bad. I don't want, whether it's something they disclose to you, I don't want to accuse a parent of something. I don't, like, whatever it might be in that moment, you don't have any back. So you have to be placed in that situation beforehand. And I'll just play it. We'll go through. My favorite one is the middle school one. I'll tell you why. The high school one doesn't give you this, but so it kind of gives you a scenario. You can click on it. The thing I love about this is you kind of have the expert tagging along with you if you want, or you can jump right into the scenarios. There's students with scenarios, there's little descriptions. We'll talk to one of the students, and then there's whatever the topic might be. There's an expert giving you a 2-minute recap on resiliency for this one. We went down bullying, suicide prevention, and so you have all these same relations. You'll have the teacher kind of talking, and then what I love about it, let's try out, let's do Jen. Scenarios, puts you in a situation and it does let you know what your final outcome should be. So if you need to get this person to a counselor, if you just need to get more information, so it'll give you kind of a scenario of what you should be doing. So the other thing that I'm not gonna click out of here, if you click on these two, and I'll kind of switch them around. Every state has them. I tried to give a little bit of distance. So if you click on ramifications, should be actually what we're exploring, but we're gonna explore poor ethical decision making or potentially poor ethical decision making. If you take this presentation, you click on this, it will take you to the state of Pennsylvania's teacher licensing site, which not actually their licensing, their revoking site. And it will give you all of the case studies that are happening right now, the history of case studies, everything that's going on, what people have done, what they're being accused of, all of those kind of things. And one of the most interesting conversations that my students have, and it's literally heartbreaking, which is why I jumped into this when Tracy asked me, and I was like, yes, like we don't do enough of talking about this because we feel like because the teachers are always trying to do the right thing, you've got to think about the viability piece. If you make the wrong decision, your career is over. And I don't want to scare teachers from that, but some of these teachers in here, and the most heartbreaking thing that my students saw was, oh, wait, this was reinstated. This was reinstated. This was reinstated. If someone accuses me of sexual assault in my school and that gets out and I go and have a hearing and I've been at this school, you can reinstate me all the way. That trust, that trend, like it doesn't matter that all of it was false or whatever happened. That word is out there. Now you have to think about a business, right? Like, why do we rebrand? Why do we change names of companies? Because you can't recover from certain things in the public eye. And that's a huge thing. If you're at a smaller city or a smaller school, you can't just go down to, Harrison. You can't go to D11 or D20. Like, it's there, and you're gonna have to deal with that situation. The ramifications section, if you click on this, they actually have a toolkit, which is kind of cool about how to kind of guide and protect yourself. And they've created some of their own case study of a little bit rougher things than we talk about here, and how to protect yourself from that. So the state of Pennsylvania has created a toolkit, and it's got some goofy stuff, some really bad acting videos and stuff like that in it too, to kind of go through simulation. But if you take it for what it's worth, it will help you go through a situation that somebody else went through without having to go through yourself. And then just know what is that distance that you need to keep in every situation. So we talk about that and we kind of go through those things. Again, so what started out as me creating a couple of scenarios and going over it with 3 people, turned into 7 different assignments for my students. But the nice thing is it all blends in with what I was already doing. And now I got to throw in a whole bunch of stuff. And this is real stuff that when we look at the teacher shortage, we can't afford to lose any of our teachers. But my key takeaway, so every course that I design and create, this is what my cornerstones are, my North Star is complexity, craftsmanship, and authenticity. What those mean to me when I create them, I have a little document here. Some of these complex, it requires higher order thinking, connects to big concepts, transfer of understanding, has multiple perspectives, application of higher order literacy skills. In what I created here, that happened, and my students told me that. That's all I know. The craftsmanship, when they were designing, when they were doing reflection, I'll have another quote coming up from one of them. They have to do their unit plans. So they do a unit plan, the parents teaching, they design, create this, teach it, video themselves, record it, do it, and then do all that stuff. Then they do it all again to see if we have some growth in that area. In their reflections on that, which have nothing to do with this project. I'll show you a quote that brings almost everything up that we talked about because it came through. So their craftsmanship is there. It's detailed. It's beautiful. It connects through execution. They're using these things in their classroom. Authenticity is my last one, which is Creative thinking from the students, uses formats and standards from the professional world. Again, these are apprentice teachers, so they're in the professional world, they're actually applying what they're learning. Connects to academic standards with real world issues. I like standards because I like data, because I'm an engineer, but I don't like standards for what it causes teachers to do in the classroom. Only if it can connect them to a real world situation and it's going to benefit them. And my big one is the work matters to my students and ideally contributes to the larger community. And in all these situations, I can see that everything that we did all of those things because they're going into the classroom much better prepared. And they tell me about it in the reflection and reflections. For me, the top three were integrity, trust, and accountability. Integrity isn't always obvious, and it can be taught. When I was a kid, there's a phrase, right? Like integrity, you're just born with it. You're born with it. Oh, that's scary. That's really, really scary if you have it or you don't have it, right? When you put decision makers in decisions before they have to make those decisions, you can 10x, like Gary Klein, his link is on the resource page if you want to go look at the data. It's not in education, but it's in other fields. And it's just when you have to make critical decisions in a quick moment. Like, how can we do that? And what's the best way to get people to do that? Trust, for me, ethical trust is different than normal trust. My kids can trust that I'm going to show up every day, teach my class, and that there's going to be an agenda, there's going to be this. That's all trust, right? Well, it's not ethical trust. If something's going on in their life, if they have an abusive situation, if they saw something on their way to school, do we have that kind of trust? Do we have the kind of trust where, and I'll get to an add-on that I want to do for next year, but do we have that kind of trust? You have to be vulnerable as a leader. You have to share your mistakes, your growth, what came from them, and how you got there. Otherwise, they're going to think, especially as teachers, we are made to feel professors, right? When we stand in front, we have to know everything. Gosh, I hope not, right? Like if we can get out in front of them, because then what are we telling them? That perfection is what's already there and you can't lend it. Right? So like, be really careful about that. With accountability, it isn't about fear, definitely not just for subordinates. I think a lot of times accountability is passed on to subordinates, it's passed on to your students, and they need to be held accountable for everything they're doing. But yet, do you? And if you do make a mistake, are you vulnerable? Do you own it? Do you share it? Because that's a much better life skill for those kids to know when I do screw up. Right? I do it daily, right? Like I mess up doing. I had a teacher that I worked with for years. Literally, when that bell rang, the door got slammed. She would not let anybody else in the room. They had to go all the way upstairs, down the hall to the office to get a pass to come back. They are now missing 5 to 7 minutes of her class. What you just told the kids is that what we're doing in here doesn't really matter if you're not in time, which is not okay. She was also the same person who showed up late every step. Which just drives you nuts, right? So this is the quote out of, like I said, this is one of my students' final thing. It's pretty long, but I'm going to read it first. You don't know. You can see all the way. I think maintaining open dialogue, the highlighted words, the reason I didn't put anything in here, this is literally from my student, and we can literally make connections. The words are just there and they blend over. I think maintaining an open dialogue of why I have the students do what I'm asking them is important. For example, if I need them to take a quiz and an assessment all in 1 week, because the district wants to collect data, rule of law, the district demanding it. I think being honest with the students about why they are being tested so much can go a long way. At the same time, treating them fairly in a scenario such as this also will improve my relationships with them and make classroom management easier in the long run. That viability I should have long run. That would be also continuing with the scenario. I think finding common ground where I can recognize that my hands are tied, but also talking with them about how to make the rest of the week or the following weeks more enjoyable for them will go a long way. So all of those things came out of just a paragraph that one of my apprentice teachers last fall just wrote in his unit plan, which, like I said, had nothing to do with the day. I didn't ask him to connect anything through. That's just the takeaways that they're doing. So I'm guessing some of this is common sense, but I'm also banking on the fact that by having them go to this conference, by going through those exercises that we just talked about, these things are just blending very, very nicely. It's just happening. I mean, it's not just happening. We're causing it to happen by implementing these modules that the Daniels Fund has generously given us money to create so that we can then impact ethics in all of our fields. This is my call for action as we move forward on this. This is from last weekend. It's so beautiful up there. And if you go back to my single tree theme all the way through here, when I get to my last slide, I just want to put forests in because I feel like so many of us are out there battling, no matter what it is. We are that lone tree on the ethics bandwagon. We don't have 100 people here today, right? So as much as I don't want to be the lone tree, we need our lone trees. But the more lone trees that we bring in, the bigger the forest is, the richer the ecosystem, the biodiversity, everything becomes so much better. For me, one of the next steps is going to be ethics and mandatory reporting module. I think as teachers, we're all told we're mandatory reporters. Well, as professors, we're mandatory reporters for certain things. What does that actually mean? And what are the ethics of that? So I really want to add that piece into my apprentice teachers before they go out there and they get stuck in that situation of, okay, do I report or do I not? That's not mandatory reporting, that's an ethical dilemma. Like, what are the rules, what are the laws that I have to do? And then who do I have to be held responsible to? And my hang up this weekend was just realizing that if it's just one tree, it's not much. I need at least one more tree out there, right, helping us out. So thank you guys. I really want to thank the Daniels Fund for giving me this opportunity and allowing me to develop and create these things and share them with you and anybody else that wants to watch the video. So do you have any questions?